It's great to be here. My name is Gustav Rosén. It's an honor to be talking in front of you and also before Kai and Allan. So I'm warming you up and then the big boys will come on stage. I'm going to start my talk with a bit of history because once I was an API. At the age of 12, I was introduced to private business, a manufacturing company. In 5th grade, you go out for a week and you're supposed to do something practical and bring some experience back with your future choices of business. So they showed me a room where there was a printer, one of those dot matrix printers, and they said each time an order arrived, you rip the paper off and you give it to the lady at the desk. So I figured this was needed, but why don't they automate it somehow? It should be possible to automate it. So 12 years later, after doing my education and training in other areas, I joined an American company in Pittsburgh in the manufacturing area. And I went from being an integration to becoming an integrator. So I worked as an integration specialist. And after a couple of years, I became an architect. So I scoped projects and proposed solutions for projects. And then, after an additional 10 years, I joined the vendor side of things, and I started delivering API strategy, agile teams for API delivery, and also operations as part of an own company called Entiros Integrations that is here today. And the conclusions that I've been drawing over these years is that there's a lot of good stuff in company. The first thing you see in companies and most of the first things that they lift forward are their shining platforms, the stuff that they're really proud over. Right now, it's the API portals because you can see it, right? The API catalog, it's designed. We put a lot of effort into our API catalogs. But when you get closer to the business and when you get on the ground, then you see that just in a suburb close to those shining buildings, there are still legacy integrations. And there are still legacy APIs not being REST APIs or Kafka-based event integrations and so on. So the vast majority of integrations and API that we have running in our companies today, they are actually not of the newer kind. So we have a really big legacy challenge that we need to manage. In fact, only 29% of our applications, if you take a global average in a business, is connected. So more than 70% of applications, disregarding if being microservices or COTS applications, are disconnected, which means that there are probably more people being shown to rooms, to rip papers, and to hand it on and so on. But I started Entiros 10 years ago, strictly focusing on integrations and APIs. And what we see emerging now are actually two types of companies. The newer, younger companies, where there's no legacy challenge. Maybe that represents the new buildings. And if you do an electrification analogy here, you don't have to battle legacy. So a new car manufacturer, a new sales company, a new logistics company, they're way ahead of the competition when it comes to how their architecture looks like. And I think all of you know this, but we don't talk about it that much. We rather talk about our API portals or our Kafka servers, and then the other stuff, let's forget about that. And it's hard to migrate away from. So why should we talk about this? Why do I want to talk about application networks? Because that's the topic. And why do I want to talk about open application networks? Well, if we can understand what our business looks like, also in these more heritage areas, then we will be able to change it faster. So we will be able to transform in a more deliberate way. In fact, most companies, they don't have a view of their application network. And what this means is that up to 70% of the APIs being built, they were not needed at all. You can imagine when someone shows up here and they're supposed to run a cable here. you don't connect it in the middle, right? You do it point to point, end to end. So you start over again and again and again. So 70% of our APIs are waste. So we can talk about how to build APIs, or we can talk about if we should build them at all. So we have a foundational idea in our company. We go in as integration partners to companies of varying sizes, but when you get more than 100 developers, maybe even approaching 500 or 1,000 developers, you lose transparency. So openness is a key thing that we bring to the table. And when we talk about openness, we talk about 4 things. It's about doing collaboration in the company, so get more than 29% of your applications connected. That is only possible if you have transparency in your application network, so you know what you have running. Each new developer joining a company should have access not only to a REST API catalog, right, but to the whole application landscape. Then, when you can identify what types of integrations you have, you can start share and reuse. And at the end of the day, it's about empowering the developers to do what they should do, to have fun and develop and share their APIs, right? Not try to search for information. So what we have found, especially in larger companies, is that you can focus on connected applications, but you have to start with a developer organization. So who is in our company? Who is providing services for our company? What does the divisions and the development team look like? Then you can start building an open application network. And if you get developers connected in tooling, I'm going to show it soon for open application networks, then you will have an accelerated application landscape when it comes to connecting. But let's define it first. What do we mean by an open application network? Well, first of all, it's not a central service center of excellence that bring integrations, that you have to do an order and wait for a couple of weeks or maybe even a month to get an API delivered. An open application network relies on these 4 foundations, also in the organizational aspect. So instead of doing central service, you do things distributed. You empower developers to build their APIs and include them in a holistic view. This is based on a very simple model. Each application team, they don't only have APIs, but references to other APIs. It's not more than that. What we have been really good at is to do our open API specifications, interface specifications. So we have our API catalogs, right, with Swagger files and so on. But what we're not that good at is to describe our references. Well, we do it in Maven with POM files and so on, but we need to understand what APIs am I referencing in my application. And by using this simple model, we can actually get our open application network described. This is quite simple. It can be done by an enterprise architect centrally. For instance, when you have 6 or 7 systems. But if you make this a bit bigger, let's say that you have 200 key systems, and you wonder how they're connected, and you want to know, okay, how are they connected through APIs? You need to have something like this that can really capture your full integration landscape. And as a third point, when you start looking at the references, you have the full scope of a mid-sized company running maybe 200 to 300 applications. So this looks like a mess, right? But if you have it in an open application network, you can start massaging the data. So you can reorder it. You can describe what is customer related, what is product related, what is orders, invoices, transactions, and so on and so on. And suddenly you get IDs on things. So your applications, your services, your references get ID'd, and you can use those IDs in your logging and your monitoring. And suddenly you have the semantics to get end-to-end chains in your landscape. Some companies do that now, and they're really successful. They're much faster than the competition because they know what they have. They're not building 70% waste APIs, they're building the right APIs and the right event integrations. So why do we need this, you might ask? Well, let's take a simple example. If you have your application network, you can present it in a structured form. You can do a subset of it, for instance, what we're going to do in the next project to launch a new market. Then you know the current state, right? And you can describe the change in a much more easy fashion. So what APIs are impacted, what application teams does need to be involved, etc., etc. There's quite a few projects being run right now where there's not a current state description before the project starts. It might involve 10 teams that upgrade an ERP system, for instance, and they take quite some time to deliver due to that. So how does this work? How is it being built? Is someone sitting behind the knobs centrally? No. Again, the documentation needs to be distributed, right? So an open application network should be crafted by the developers and the application owners. So the whole idea here is that you get access to a central tooling that you can self-serve. You provide your piece of the information, disregarding if you're 100 developers or if you're 1,000 developers. It takes maybe 2 to 3 or 4 weeks to get your picture. Then you puzzle that together through the service and reference descriptions. So who am I calling behind my API? And you get the full picture. It takes less than a month to do it, but so few companies have it. And again, disregarding if you're Gantt, that's revenuing 5 billion, maybe less than 100 developers working for Gantt. Or if you're Volvo Cars, 250 billion company with 3,500 developers in 400 teams. It takes less than a month to get your application network sorted and get all the IDs you need for your Elk stack or your monitoring solution to get up and running. So is this just a tooling that you can throw on the problem so you get all the insight? No, there's actually more to it. I was here 1 year ago when we launched Certified Integrator. This is becoming a ISO 17 or 24 standard for integrators building APIs. It takes 1 day to do the certification. What you do is that you learn the 10 rules of thumbs for building APIs and integrations. 2 of those rules are how to put IDs on things and how to use a concept model, exactly like in the open application network that you saw. Certifications are good for professionals, but they're even better for people who purchase APIs. So avoiding 70% waste, actually ordering the APIs that are needed. So there's a quick introduction, 1 hour that can be taken. And then you can use this when purchasing APIs in-house or from vendors. And what you get from open application networks is basically 1 and 2, how to describe and ID the stuff you have in your landscape. I'm really proud today because we have been running this system for almost 3 years for our clients, but today we're releasing it openly. So Swedish-built software for the integration industry. And we're really happy to have a launch today and also a demo tomorrow. So you can sign up on Storify, free to use. You can pump Storify full of your data. There's a DevOps API. We've phrased the term tagger. So I'm sure all of you know about Swagger files, but now there's tagger files to describe your API dependencies. So you can fuel Storify with your tagger files, and within less than 30 days, you get your full picture of your API landscape. You can do that in YAML notation or with JSON commits through the API. So you don't need to do it through the web UI, but you can do it as part of your build chain as well and check it in with your source code. There's also a Storify Slack bot, so you get fast access when you communicate to your fellow developers. You can ask Storify for this and that and get all the dependencies and parts of the application landscape that you just saw. And of course, there's a web UI with the graph visualizations that you saw. So for us, this is just a start. We've launched now the foundation for open application networking. It's based on a graph database. And the next step for us is to start releasing version management, so do historical tracking. If you run a project, you should be able to see before and after views of that project and so on. And right now we're looking at blockchain technology for referential integrity. So when you're calling someone else's API, you want to make sure that that API will stay the same. So it's really nice use case, API referencing for blockchain technology. This is going to be a freemium, but for everyone who signs up during October, this is free forever. So sign up and use it. And sometime in November, it will start to cost money for others. It's very, very cheap, a couple of dollars per month, but you'll get it for free. If you have any questions, please ask them after the session or come to our booth, Entiros Integrations. Thanks for this.